Thank you for joining Beyond the Workbench, a podcast where Odin Clack and Michael Magnus discuss life, business, and how to help entrepreneurs grow and innovate.
Welcome back, sir. Back for another episode of Beyond the Workbench podcast. Good to see you as always. Get a chance to catch up with you. How are things going?
Man, it is 2026 is off to a running start. It's exciting, but it's also kicking my butt a little bit. So, and I know we talk between episodes, and it's true for you as well. It's a blessing, but it keeps you busy.
It does keep you busy. For us, like on the retail side of things, you go through the holiday season. It's just nonstop. Sales are good, all that kind of stuff, all this activity, and all of a sudden it comes to a crash. It just goes off a cliff. It's all expected, normal stuff, and I know a lot of retailers go through that. But even though the store stuff has kind of crashed off, everything else is ramped up. Like corporate stuff, planning for me, I'm trying to focus on planning and retooling and getting all those things done that I swear I was going to do last year. I didn't do. I'm focused on those, which is giving me, a lot of time. Well, it resulted in me being in the shop a lot. We're doing a lot of product testing, prototyping, things like that. I'm really focused on some takeaways from the conversation we had with Dave Munson months ago about product development. And we're going to talk a little more about product development later today. But I'm taking all the time now while things are slower in the shop, hitting it hard. Hopefully it results in some good stuff too.
It's interesting. Always you have that big rush during Christmas, and then you have the holidays themselves, and then you get into the new year, and it can be difficult to get momentum again because you kind of have that little bit of burnout followed by a little bit of a break.
Yeah.
And then some people get energized by that, but some people get pretty comfortable in that relaxation. And so it can be a little bit of a challenge sometimes to really dig back in when there's no pressing deadlines. There's no urgent things that need to be done, but you still have the same number of hours in the week to work, and making sure that you're using those productively, because if you don't, you won't have much urgency later in the year.
Or you will have urgency because you weren't working through the slow season,
Right.
Like I've got my guys, I've intentionally keeping them where things are moving at a nice pace. They're not stressed out there. They're working, but we're not cranking on things, right? And I think that's good. They deserve a break because it was a busy season. There's another side of this also related to this, which is, we talked about, you're so busy and then you kind of fall back, but it's cash. So a lot of business owners, big or small, they sold all their stuff through the fall and many of them are sitting on this pile of cash they normally don't have throughout the year. So they're like, oh, I don't need to, I can relax, I can take a vacation, I can chill out. You can, right? But that cash does not last, never lasts as long as you think. And so I think we've fallen into that trap before in the past where we are more relaxed and not pushing as hard for sales promotions and work with customers as we usually would be. But then when the cash is out, you're like, oh crap, I've got to start this, build momentum all over again, right? Really, I think the smart thing to do is realize that cash reserve needs to last you as long as possible through the year. One, use it to do things that are going to help you through the year, and then try to keep momentum going. And that's a tougher thing. So this is not the season to be relaxing, no matter how you look at it. Maybe you're naturally busy because you got family stuff. I think we both have a lot of family stuff going on right now also.
Oh, yeah.
Second semester of the school year is always busy, and there's not as many breaks as you get in the fall. So it's going to be a wild ride through the end of the school year. But let's not fall back. Let's try to get that to-do list going. Let's try to get through as far through it as possible so we can be a little more relaxed when things are stressful, like summer, like next fall. Let's get all the planning stuff done now. And of course, this is one of those topics. Remind me I said all this stuff in about 3 months. Check in to make sure I'm not just saying it, but I'm actually doing it. A lot easier to say it than do.
The joke I was kind of making earlier too is that relaxing now sometimes means that you don't have the opportunity to be busy later, because this is the time that you do the things that set you up for success later in the year, that if you don't take the time to do them now, you're trying to backfill, and then you're trying to, why is the phone not ringing? Why am I not getting the Shopify notifications? Whatever that looks like for your business. Sometimes, I think someone gave me the advice one time of, if you look back 5 years from now, what decision do you think you would have made? I think you can even simplify that to, if you look back at this time from, December, time travel a little bit. If you think of your Odin in December of 2026, what is Odin in December of 2026 going to wish that Odin February 2026 had done to kind of get him to where he needs to be? And that's that can be a helpful with decision making sometimes of what's going to get us to where we're trying to go.
This is making motivation, to be honest with you. I mean, you said like year to year, but hell, I can think that way for last week, like 5 days ago. What do I wish I would have been doing that I didn't do? It would have been beneficial now. It's the timelines can be even shorter, but it's motivation. So there are times when even though you feel busy, but you're sitting there like, oh, little burnout. What do I do now? I don't know what to do next. Well, maybe that question is, well, 5 days from now, what are you going to be wishing you did today? I wish I would have planned out. I wish I would have bought those supplies. I wish I would put that order, whatever, the list goes on. But that's a really good way of looking at it. What do I wish? What am I going to be wishing I did today, 5 days from now, or a year from now, or a month from now?
Kind of takes you out of the moment, where in the moment it's easy to make one decision or another, or do something a little bit reactionary. But when you're thinking about things, and it almost makes you accountable to your future self too, in an interesting kind of way. So, yeah, it's something I go back to pretty regularly when making some big decisions. But now that we're talking about it, it's probably a pretty good framework for just casual decisions as well.
It probably is. You're probably right. This podcast is going to start upsetting my team because what I'm going to start doing is taking these little phrases and sayings that we make as we're talking and start putting posts like motivational posters all over the workshop. They'll be in the bathroom, they'll be on the outside wall. They'll be everywhere, and they're like, okay, we get it, Clack. Let it. It's going to go everywhere. They have to tell them, hey, it's not for you guys. It's really more for me to remind me of the crap that I said or the things we talked about because they're easy to forget. I mean, it's some habit building things that need to go into keeping this momentum going.
Let's keep the what are you going to wish you had done 5 days from now out of the bathroom. That one probably doesn't have the best placement there as we talk about product placement.
Of
And
course, it's captured audience is all I'm saying.
it's true. It's
The
true.
place. Anyway, well, what else is going on? There's I know you and I are going to be meeting up later today, which is kind of cool. We are recording earlier today, which is nice. We normally are recording like 7 o'clock, 8 p.m. at night. Tonight, it's reverse. We're at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I know I've been up for a while. You tend to be a early riser. I feel pretty energized. So this is nice.
Yeah.
We may have to adjust our schedule a bit. I know. And along with that, we've been talking about adjusting just how often we are recording each month. You guys can updates on that. I mean, so what's the plan right now?
Well, based on some of the conversations we had, and previously we talked about planning for the podcast and really looking at all the different factors that go into it. Historically, we started with the cadence of every other week. And although I don't think we should change that too much, I do recognize where there are some months where there are, that would have us doing 3 episodes in a month. And we do, as we've mentioned before, have an editor that we pay. He's great and worth it. We do have our own time that we take out of our schedules to do the podcast, and it just becomes slightly more sustainable to do every first and third Thursday versus every other Thursday. And most months, no one will ever feel a difference. It's just, 2 or 3 months out of the year, there will probably be an off week. And candidly, you and I probably need that as well. We can take that time to do some planning throughout the year and things like that too. So that's one thing. That's one slight change. Another shift, another change in schedule, something that's come up that's exciting, good news, bad news thing is that I will not be coming to Prescott this year. And we've talked about us co-teaching the classes there. And I was really looking forward to going for my first time, but at my day job, I was recognized as a top performer, which came with a cruise for my family and I. It so happens to be the same weekend that our classes would be. And although I do not like to back out of commitments, my wife might back out of her commitment to me if I decided to say no thank you to a cruise to go to a leather show. So talk to Cheryl and Ralph. You'll still be there. You'll still be doing the classes. So those classes will still be offered. But unfortunately, small change, will not be in Prescott, although I'll be on a boat. So I don't know. Actually, I've never been on a cruise. And it also is one of those things that I would have a difficult time justifying the expense having never been on one.
Yeah.
So us getting a free cruise is probably a good scenario for being able to test the waters, so to speak, of just, is that a thing that our family enjoys? Because it's no small investment. And part of me is worried I'm going to go stir crazy. I've been assured by many people that there's plenty to do.
So first off, congratulations to you. That's a really good thing, and I'm that's good. You should take advantage of that and take the family. I know we were good. It was both going to be both our first times in Prescott. I got to get the pronunciation correct. Prescott, Arizona. But I think it's good, right? Go hang out with your family. We all need more of that, and this is a great opportunity. It'd be hard to pass up. I'll still do the classes. We're going to do the business class. We're going to do marketing class. I'm adding one more class. It's like you were going to add another class as well, but specifically, I'm adding one more class where we'll be talking through Shopify and e-commerce specifically, kind of continuing with our theme of these leathercraft business related classes. And I'm really excited about that. I've got some cool things in store. And then you'll join up again. We'll connect again on the next event, which hopefully will next leathercraft event, which will be, I think, Sheridan.
Should be. Yep.
And so we'll start all over again. And we'll do the thing. We'll do more classes there. Maybe do some more, switch some things up. But that's all coming. So it's not like you're out the game altogether. You're just going to miss this one for a very good reason, and you should feel good about that. Now, real quick, the cruise. I know the first time I went on a cruise, and granted, this was pre-COVID cruising. I thought I was going to go stir crazy. I didn't understand. I thought it was like a cattle call. Too many people on a small ship. Actually, the cruise can be whatever you want it to be. It can be full-on activities day in, day out, or it can be as relaxing, as quiet as you want. I prefer the quiet. My wife, however, prefers the activities. We'll see where you land on it, but I'm sure it'll be a good time.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And it's exciting. The kids are very excited, and it is an honor to be recognized in that way.
That's
That
cool.
the company I work with is fairly large, and so it's there are a handful of people that get to go, but they have a whole itinerary, and they charter buses to take people from the office down to Galveston, and so it's a very well coordinated event. For where I work, there's a lot of people that look forward to that opportunity, and so trying not to be jaded about it. I'm trying to be excited about it. But sometimes when there's just so many things to do, it's actually a struggle to celebrate the wins because
Yeah.
you're saying, that's awesome. I'm glad somebody thought I did good, but what's next? And
Right.
good to sometimes take a breath and say, you know what, I've accomplished some things, and it's okay to be recognized for that. So
Yeah, it's okay to say you're awesome, dude. It's you are. I mean, it really is. Let some people say it. You say it occasionally. Say you're awesome. And just accept it, dude. So yeah, we'll miss you, but the show will go on, and we'll catch you on the next event.
But before even that, we're going to an event today. Glossed over that a little bit. We're recording in the morning. After we get done today, we're going to head to the Tandy flagship store because they're unveiling the new Heritage Collection, which is a lot of the things that were in the Stolman Museum. They have a new location, a little bit more of a trendy area in Fort Worth. Hopefully, they get more foot traffic, more people kind of discovering what leathercraft can be. Where they were before was a great store, but it was attached to the corporate headquarters. It was huge. It was pretty difficult to get to, and you weren't just going to stumble across it, right? You see it in the window as you drive through, right?
Right.
But then you have to get off the highway and loop back. Anyway, all of those things said, where they are now, I think they'll have a lot more foot traffic and
Right.
kind of discovery. So that'll be interesting. I'll be curious to kind of see how that happens. But I'm excited to see kind of what the new space looks like.
Like you, I've not been to the new store yet. This will be my first time there. I know they've been kind of soft openings for a few weeks now, but the area they're in is awesome. And it's part of the area will you actually get a vibe for Fort Worth. Where they were, it was like off of I-20 south. It just didn't really have any culture down there. It was just a store next to a warehouse. It was fine. It was actually a pretty store, but it was off being bad. This is like in the heart of downtown, right outside of downtown Fort Worth. It's cool stuff, restaurants and all this other stuff around there. It is a much more visually appealing location for them. So we'll see. I'm interested to see. I've talked to some folks there. They said that the new store has a different type of a vibe and kind of lead into like a new way of retailing and merchandising. So I'm interested in seeing how that works. I know it is a smaller space. The last store they had was massive. It was kind of cavernous in there. This should be a bit more warmer. But today is the museum specifically. We're going to see Jim Linnell will be there, and I know he will be. I guess is he doing like the opening or something? But there's also a work from a lot of other people in there as well.
Yeah, I think he's doing the kind of the tour of the museum, which some of his work's in there, along with some Stolman pieces and just a lot of other people over time. And then I think I saw that maybe he's doing a demonstration too. But I think the big piece is kind of talking about the history of the pieces that are there and kind of giving some context and introducing the new museum. But I know over the years he's been pretty involved, not just when he worked at Tandy, but even since then, even giving feedback about how pieces were lit so that they had shadows so that people could see the depth and things like that. So he is a great candidate to kind of go through and talk about a lot of those types of things. And he's very familiar with that collection from
Yeah.
his years at Tandy. So I've seen the tour from Jim at the previous space. So I'm excited to see how this tour is different with the kind of reconfiguration.
Right.
There's probably some newer pieces in there as well. They have
That's what I heard.
some different pieces of history in there too. So I'm excited to get the 2.0 tour of the museum.
And I'm excited also that we're going to get offside. We're going to get out of the box here, right? Because we're normally talking. I mean, you're in Fort Worth. I'm here in the Louisville area. We're what, about 30 minutes apart. You're right. But we always
Right.
film this way. It's easier to do it this way. But we're actually going to kind of take it on the road. I'll make sure I get some video and maybe we can slice some of that stuff in as we do the podcast. But be cool. And maybe it'll lead to some additional like out the box on location podcasting opportunities for us later. I mean, we've been kind of filling this podcasting thing out for the last few months, and some things we got down and some things I think we're going to improve on as we go through the year. And I'm excited to see. So this would be cool. So looking forward to it. We'll see you there on site and well. But that's not the only new thing going on. There's other new things happening in 2026. Got the Tandy stores and all these other brands, whatever. But you guys personal stuff too that we've talked about kind of in passing. We've kind of hinted at it, but I think that now's a good time to actually say exactly what you've been working on, and it's big. So you want, I think you share it.
It's been a passion project for a while, and as we've referenced it in some past episodes, and I think even at the episode at the beginning of the year talked about how sometimes when you have a full-time job and other commitments, these things that you're doing on the side take more time.
Yep.
And this is one that I've been very intentional about how kind of to roll it out, but did launch new website actually right before we started recording. I pulled the Band-Aid off and hit publish. So
this is my virtual
drum roll.
Drum roll. There you go.
So, but the new website is learnleathercraft.com. It is kind of a joke that it's a demilitarized zone for leathercraft. It's a place where you can go. It's a really good starting point for just general information to kind of say, okay, where are you in your leatherworking journey? The intention is for it to be a neutral starting point, not just where there's no particular artists or instructors that kind of are on the homepage, but really more about helping people find an entry point to leather based on where they are. Are they beginners, intermediate, advanced? Well, where do you go to kind of take it to the level that's appropriate? But also looking at, let's say you're a woodworker and you just want to add a leather handle to a box. Well, traditionally, if you want to learn leathercraft, you got to get a basic 7 and tool a Western flower before you can ever even talk about doing anything else. And that's not what everybody's trying to get at. And so trying to just create these entry points and partnering with other people, making it more of a community resource. Justin Fitzwater, who we've had on the show, helped write a lot of the content around why leatherwork is really good for firefighters. And if you're a firefighter and you're interested in getting started in leather, what does that look like? What are types of projects? And then also serving as a distributor for people who have patterns and videos. They want to share their ideas, they want to share their patterns, but they may not want to do e-commerce or marketing.
Yeah.
And I do like doing e-commerce and marketing. And so there's the other side of what's there is not just kind of that educational piece, but also serving as a distribution for all kinds of different things. Already have, speaking of Justin, he just made 3 new pattern packs for making fire shields. And that is where they are being launched, working with some people and making their free patterns available, not just newer artists creating new ideas, but also working with some of the legacy families of there are a number of people that there's videos and patterns that are close to being lost because the leather workers themselves have passed, and working with some of those families to digitize a lot of those things, but then make them available again so that they can be earning some residual income off of that. So for those who are familiar, Bill Gomer, phenomenal saddle maker. He had a pair of saddle making videos while working with his wife and son on making those digitally available so people can learn saddle making from Bill Gomer again, keep his name out there, but also create a little bit of passive income for his widow to be able to take care of what she needs to take care of. So I feel really good about that. Now, it is modeled. I will make money with everybody, but I don't make anything unless other people are also thriving. And so,
Yeah, it's a profit making tool. Great. I mean, but part of this is you mentioned you make money off of it, but really only if everyone else is making money off of it, right? So
mhm.
just give me a little more about how, like, if I was a crafter and I'm going to put my patterns or my videos here because I don't want to run an e-commerce site, how does that work? Just on the high level?
Kind of the basic structure that I have with everybody so far is more or less a 50-50 split, but that is of the sale price. And so, for the way that I'm structuring it, and again, this is kind of starting out, this is how things are being launched. It may evolve over time, but what made sense in some of the planning and modeling, and we can talk about that here in just a minute, like what goes into my process for
Yeah.
starting a business and launching a product. The 50-50 split off of the top of the sale price gives a very clean number for someone to be able to understand what it is that they're getting,
Mhm.
for those that I'm partnering with. But then also from that other 50%, that's where I'm paying credit card fees, platform fees, marketing. Like I do have a built in marketing budget where every time there's a sale, money goes directly back into promoting those products. Hopefully, it'll help cover some of the travel for going to shows, things like that. And eventually even make a little bit of money. But really, my goal the first year, maybe even 2 years, is to build something that is meaningful for the industry, that's helpful for the industry, and again, very neutral, community oriented. You're never going to see my name on the homepage. It's actually hard to find my name on the website at all because that's not the point. I much rather them find you and Justin and Bill Gomer and Paul Burnett and all of these other people that I'm having the opportunity to either work with them directly or with their families. To me, that's how we all kind of thrive, and that's how it becomes sustainable for a
Mhm.
lot of the leather workers out there too, to be able to monetize their craft. So that's the goal. We'll see how that works out.
As a consumer of content like this and a creator of content like this, two things that, just to kind of brag on what you have going on here is, it's not really the norm that platforms continue to pay and support the artist, right? Usually it's like, put it out there and there may be a transaction there, there may not, and artist walks away and it's the platform that's really, benefiting. And I'm not saying it's wrong because there's the reason why it's been like that, but I like your take on it, which is like, yes, you make money because so you can help support and grow the site, but also the artists and everyone's involved. And then the second part of that is the demilitarized zone piece. It is natural, I think, for when someone comes into a craft or skill, right? Maybe just because they happen to be, they land on Odin's, my site, and it's like, I like what he's doing. I'm going to take his resources, learn from this guy, and that's where they start. It wasn't that they were choosing only Odin's way. They were just like, that's this the first guy I saw. At times, it can send people down this tunnel where they don't have blinders on. They don't see all the other great parts of the craft. There's a lot of people that do things completely different than I do, or completely different than Jim or you or somebody else. Yeah, start one place, cool, but it's nice to have access to other ways, right? It's nice to have access to 300 different ways to make a belt or, tool a flower or make a bag. I mean, I think that's where we all grow. So using this as kind of a clearinghouse for all those type of things, I think is really good. It's not like this is the only resource. Some of these things are in multiple places, but you have it here, and then right next to you say it's like there's other ways to do that as well. It's well organized. I'm really excited about it as a crafter, as a consumer, to see where you go with this in the future. Hopefully you'll allow me some leeway to give feedback and comments along the way. Obviously, I want to send some content your way as well. But really excited. This is a wonderful step forward for one, something you've been talking about for a while, and two, for the community as a whole. And I think the community will be very receptive of it. So congratulations to you. This is good.
To even take it a step further, when somebody comes and let's say they find the beginner's page, right? It'll give them some basic information, link them out to some other things. But the goal is also not to say this is the place you have to learn. On that beginner page, it links out to video series on YouTube that are from Jim or Joe or Don or a lot of the other people, linking out to the different places to be able to purchase beginner things, beginner sets, things like that. So again, the it's really intended to be more of a starting point. It can take them as far as they need to and then help them get to kind of where those resources are that they need. And it was funny, I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and they just had like this sigh of relief And I was like, what's that about? And she said, people ask me all the time, how can I get started in leathercraft? And my answer always is, well, how much time you got? Because that's a more complicated question than you think. And she was like, I'm grateful that I have a simple answer. This will save me so much time. And being able to say, look, there's a great resource to be able to go and find and answer a lot of those questions, and it'll send you on the way. And eventually you'll find all the recommendations I would have given you, but only when they are the appropriate recommendations for what you're trying to do. And a lot of the things on the site, kind of like with your pattern, several of the people that I'm doing things with, it's things that they host on their site as well already. And they're hosting it here as a second place. They're distributing it there as well. And I'm great with that. There's people who sell patterns at Weaver and Tandy and everywhere else, and then they sell them themselves on their own website. I don't know why that should be any different with anything else. And so, there are a few people that are part of the launch. Daniel Reach is one of them, that he has a couple of patterns in video, and you can still buy them from his website, but he's making them available through learnleathercraft.com as well, and just kind of see how that goes. So really looking forward to it. If there's anybody who is interested in having any of those conversations, or even just putting free patterns out and making them accessible so people have different things to kind of start with, glad to talk to anybody about that.
This is not something that comes together overnight. This is something that takes a lot of thought. I have to imagine, and not imagine, because I've talked about this, but a lot of back and forth, a lot of asking questions about the who, what, why, when, where, the intent, and things like that. There's probably some takeaways from your experience here that other people can use as they think about their growing their businesses, their product lines. I mean, I'm growing my product line or shifting it around quite a bit. And you have hinted about your background experience in product development. With that background in mind, what were your takeaways? How did you work your way into taking the site from an idea to launching it today?
Yeah, that is a great question, and probably one that's important for us to talk about, because we've alluded to it and hinted at it over different episodes, but it really drives the way that I think of things from beginning to end, right? From ideation to go to market strategy. And yeah, I'm like let's talk shop about that a little bit,
Yeah.
because I do think that there's probably some things to learn. I'll level set with anybody listening. A lot of the things that you're probably about to hear Odin and I talk about are phrases that are used more commonly in software development, but those guys are working with large teams, very large budgets, and they've had to figure out lots of efficiencies. So, plenty of things to take away from that. But that's certainly my background there helped with being able to really think through the whys behind some of the things that I did with launching it. So, what we're talking about here with product management is something that's part of the agile system. I won't go too in the weeds about that, but just know that it is a
Framework for
it's
managing projects. Yeah.
it's a framework for managing projects, largely for software. If anybody's really curious, go look up Agile, Scrum Agile, something like that, and you'll find some interesting process frameworks and things like that. But the way that I think about products, based upon things that I've learned in my job, taking that course that I've referenced before, that last year I took a product management course, it really forces you to think about what you're doing before you do it, to be very intentional. And also, on the other side of that, make sure that you don't overthink it to the point where you don't get anything done. When you are doing product management or product development, and when we talk about a product, it could be anything, right? For you, it may be a belt, or it may be, for me, a website.
It could be tangible, it could be intangible. It's just a thing you're trying to deliver.
Right. And so when we talk about all of this stuff moving forward as a product, it may be a service, it may be a physical thing, whatever that looks like. It's totally, totally different. And, when you are a product manager of a product, you're kind of like the CEO of that product. And so in a larger corporation, that means more than for me working alone by myself, right? Like, that title doesn't carry much weight, but just kind of to help people with that framework that, you have somebody on your team that they own making bags, right? Well, they need to start thinking of themselves as the CEO of bag making for Odin Leather Goods, because that is where they can take ownership of that process. They can think about how they need to plan any roadblocks, And it really, I mean, for anybody running a team that people are kind of owning processes of things, it gets them in this mindset of, I'm not just an employee. I have some ownership of not only how this works, but where we're going with it. So we've talked about kind of some of the opportunities and why that's beneficial, but really in this product management framework is where we see some of that. So before I go totally down this path and talking about my process and how it applied to building the website, what are your thoughts kind of before we get started?
We're using corporate jargon and lingo in different environments. This is like how we talk every day, right? I don't want anyone to walk away. It's very easy for someone to say, "Hey, I'm not big enough to think like that. I'm not. It's not that complicated to think like that. It's just me." That doesn't matter, right? It's just, hey, I'm at point A and I want to get to point B. What's the way to get there? How many steps are in between point A? I guess let's say point A to point Z. Then how many steps are in between? What routes are? How do I process all this stuff coming at me? I think the framework works. And if you're a small shop, you're working by yourself, don't tell yourself you're too small. You're not too small. In fact, if you can figure this out at a very small level, it will make you so much more powerful. We talked to Nate over at Lost Dutchman recently. I think that was last episode. I was really impressed with that conversation because he was throwing out some jargon, some lingo, and some terminology that really gave him more of a corporate approach, as if he was managing a much larger company than what he has. He's set up for success. He's thinking about scaling in the future, right? Who cares where he is today? I think that's how we can leverage kind of what you share with us about product development and product management today, is that it's not so much about where you are right now, it's about where you want to be and what little gems can I pull out of the conversation and what notes can I pull aside to help me think about what's in front of me. So it works for everybody, big or small. And so that's my first thing. I've had my fair share of experience in this space as well. Anyway, let's just jump into it. So let's just talk more.
Yeah. To reiterate your point, the way that I applied this framework was to part-time build a website by myself, more or less, over the last couple of months. So yes, absolutely. The principles of what we're talking about apply big or small. And I'll even kind of talk about as we go along how I applied some of them to my process and how I developed different features and things like that. But, it all starts with answering the question, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Money is the byproduct of a solution. And usually when we're starting a business, we start a business, maybe it's a hobby and then it evolves. But usually even then, somebody asked you for something. And what they asked was, I need this custom belt at an affordable price, or I need whatever that is. But they had a problem that they needed to solve. Some of us are reactionary and we build our business kind of in response to what the market demands. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. But you also can be more intentional about setting out with solving a particular problem. For me, like kind of addressed when we introduced it, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Well, there's no clean place to point people on where to start. If you go into a Facebook group and you ask, hey, I'm a beginner, where do I get started? We'll get 100 responses of why you should go talk to Joe or Don or Jim or Annie or whomever, right? Chuck, there's tons of people out there that are great places to start, but nobody really ever asked the question, what do you want to do? They just answer what's worked for them, and that's great, and that's a great resource. But to me, a problem to solve would be, how can someone discover that on their own and then lead them to, oh, okay, well, you want to do Western floral tooling, definitely go check out Don and Joe, right? Not necessarily assuming, oh, you want to start, that's where you have to go, right? So that's one problem to solve. Another problem to solve is the thing that you mentioned earlier, is that there's plenty of people out there that they've made patterns or videos, or they're interested in kind of creating some passive income for themselves, but they still want to own their intellectual property. And a lot of the platforms out there, that's kind of not the arrangement. And they're great. They're great resources, right? This is just a different way of doing it, that working more as a distributor for people to make it easier for them, because not all artists want to be marketers and web developers.
Absolutely, yeah.
A third problem to solve, and to be clear, most of the time people should start with one. If this kind of worked out that there's multiple angles, right? But if I was smarter and taking my own advice, I would have started with one problem to solve versus several. But as I looked at these larger things, I saw that they kind of grouped well with one solution, right? So the third problem is that it's very difficult to find classes. So if you want to go and learn leatherwork, you have to either go to the journal website or the Illume website or the Tandy website or wherever, to look at what classes are happening. And then hopefully it happens to be in an area where you live. And I think there has to be a better way where people can more easily find classes in one centralized hub where they can filter lists by topic. Is it online? Is it in person? Is it free? Is it expensive? There's got to be a way for people to find out what classes are available. And that not only helps the individuals who are looking, hopefully that also helps the people who are offering classes get more people there. Right. And so those are three problems to solve that I looked at and I said, you know what, I think all three of those problems are one centralized solution. So that's where you start before you answer anything else is what am I trying to solve? Because
Yeah.
it's really easy to just jump in and then you're kind of at the whim of your business develops in response to the market. And again, that's fine, but it's not the way that I chose to do it.
Well, by having clarity about what you're trying to develop, a belt, a bag, whatever, for me at least, it also helps to, as these additional ideas come into play, and heck, you and I've talked, and I was like, I've probably thrown 1,000 ideas there. What about this? And what about that? You should do this. I throw all that at you, and they may be good, they may be bad, whatever, judgment for they are. But at least having an idea already defined, this is what I'm trying to accomplish, you can easily say, okay, I can filter these out and I can take these ideas over here that are meaningful to today's goal and apply them. And these we'll just kind of put in the backlog, which backlogs are part of the agile system as well. Put them in the backlog. Maybe we get to them, maybe we don't know. But that filtering process, it starts with having a clear goal. And that, by the way, that comes up over and over again in the business classes. Like, where are you trying to go? Right? You got to have that in mind. Without that, we're just floating around and hoping we end up in a decent place. So that applies here as well. And I think you've done that. And granted, the problems you mentioned, in my mind, it all goes back to, how do I get started in leathercraft? And then you start breaking down to sub problems and those problems, and it goes deeper and deeper. But it all funnels up into the same place. I think you'd have a problem if it was these goals that were vastly different and on different ends of the spectrum, right? That's hard to develop a product for. And I have experience with that, by the way. Never ends up in a good way. Usually with regards to mobile app development, it's a nightmare. But your goals, while you have them listed, you said them as separate goals, separate problems that you're trying to solve for, they are pretty close. They're aligned. They're heading in the same direction. So I think that helps you out a lot. At least you mapped it out. You figured it out early.
That's true. Yeah. And one other piece of it too, and this kind of came up later in the process, but it did become kind of another problem to solve, or really a sub problem of how do we help people learn, is that more people are going to ChatGPT to answer questions. We've talked about how we use it, right? Well,
Every day.
ChatGPT, the way that these systems work is they find patterns, right? They find most common answers and deliver those. But if they don't have a good answer, they just make something up. And I cannot imagine anything worse for someone trying to get started than getting really bad advice on how to bevel. And so I work in that space. A lot of what my day job is working with how people find things on Google, how people find things in AI. And so I understand how that information needs to be structured. So that was really another goal with the website too, is how is this good for people? Also, how is this good for helping them find it in Google? But also, how is this good for really helping ChatGPT, for instance, be able to deliver a good answer if somebody asks questions directly in those platforms? How do you structure it so that it's easy to find? And so all comes back to how do we meet people where they are and how do we help them get started with leather work?
So you defined, kind of the goals, what you're after, what you're trying to solve
Mhm.
for. What's the next step after you have that, outlined?
The next thing is, and you've actually heard me say it a lot, the last couple of things is the people, right? Who are you trying to serve? Because once you understand the problem of there needs to be a better solution for people who want to get started, right? Well, what do the people who want to get started look like? And so really going into understanding a customer and getting customer insights. And maybe that's big data, or maybe that's just reading a Reddit thread or going to the
Personal experiences also.
personal experience. All those things are valuable in kind of coming up with some understanding. For me, a lot of it is stories that people have shared with me about frustrations they have with the industry. And you notice a theme, you notice a pattern, and you say, you know what? If this is true for a lot of people, maybe this is true for plenty of people that I haven't talked to as well, right? And got to be careful. That's a convenient sample. We live in a little bit of an echo chamber, but for the most part, you can get a pretty good idea through conversation, through experience, but then supplement that with going and understanding people and looking and what kind of questions are people asking in Facebook groups? What kind of things are they asking about in Reddit? That's where my customer is for the website, right? That may not be where your customer is for someone wanting to buy a uptown leather good, but those people exist somewhere, right? And so
Right.
figure out where are they talking and go kind of drop in. And
When I have these marketing and branding and positioning discussions, with people, the worst answer I hear, the one I hate the most is say, "Hey, who's your target audience?" The answer I get a lot is, "Well, everyone.
not everybody.
Well,
Yeah.
everyone needs this thing. Everyone needs a belt." And they're not wrong. However, it can be a struggle to try to get you to narrow in and say, okay, yes, technically anyone can use your product, anyone will maybe appreciate it, but there is a sweet spot, right? There's a person out there you're looking at, you're thinking about when you're designing this thing, someone you think is going to buy your snakeskin bag or your tooled purse or your boots or sneakers, right? Your sneakers. We talk to sneaker guys, we're seeing more and more of them, and I hope that trend will continue. But you're designing this custom pair of sneakers. Who are you thinking about? You think about Odin? Probably not. I'm a boot guy, right? You're thinking about this young guy over here. Like, how do you touch them, or how do you have to have somebody in mind. That doesn't mean that it's exclusive to that one group. It just means that maybe that group's in the middle of the bell curve. I love talking about bell curves. They cover a ton of stuff. Right? They may be a little too geeky for this podcast, but who's in the middle of the bell curve? And I've always thought, even with marketing, like if I can attack or get those people, the overflow will touch everyone else. So for your site that you just launched, who's in the middle of the bell curve? Do you use personas? Is that how you're looking at it? How do you define your audience here?
I mean, I have used personas in the past, and those are great when you want to get really deep and understanding. And what we're talking about personas is rather than saying I want to help leather workers, you can go out and say I want to help Wendy. And Wendy is a mom in the Midwest who shops at Lululemon, and when she drops off her kids, she wants to do XYZ, right? And you
Like
can't
a defined imaginary character that you can
right.
use as your test subject always. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's been used in marketing for a long time. The Home Shopping Network has Carol in Ohio, I think, is their one target customer. And when they look at things, they say, would Carol in Ohio buy that? No, it's not going on the show. Right. And it's a good filter, right? And it's a good kind of thing to get in the mind of how would I talk to this person? You can even some people get weird about this, but you can even kind of get into role play scenarios where you have somebody in the business say, okay, I want you to really get in the mindset of this person. Here's the character you're playing. Walk around the store and think about what you would think about, what would your response be to the way we've merchandised this, anything. So I don't use personas at this level, right? I don't have any issue with them. I think they're great.
Not everyone's using them. The people are getting going more like problem or use case. Personas, I think, still a good thing to know, still a good thing to understand.
I will build personas, but for where I am at kind of the starter stage of a kind of product development lifestyle, I really lean more on what we refer to as user stories, which is like very mini personas, right? And so you make a sentence that defines a person and you mad lib three pieces of information, and it can really help you get to the core of that. It's maybe not as good for figuring out your media buy, right? But for just kind of in that same problem solving vein, the three things you're trying to answer are kind of as a type of user, I want an action or a goal so that benefit or value. So putting yourself in the seat of your customer saying, I am a woodworker who wants to learn the basics of leatherwork so that I can add handles to my box, so that I can elevate the perception and quality of what I'm doing. All right, we just answered three questions, and I have a pretty solid idea of what motivates that person and what they're trying to do. Right. And so breaking things down into user stories, you can more quickly break down, okay, 1, 3, 7 different people, personas. I mean, not again, personas are deeper, but kind of users. But again, that formula that a lot of people use for user stories is, as a person, as a type of user, I want action or goal so that benefit or value. And even if you are not super technical in marketing, you don't have a ton of data, if you can't answer those three questions, you don't really know who your customer is fundamentally. And it may be that you have one type of customer, but I bet that you can think of three or four types of customers that come in. And it may be, I am a wife. I want to purchase something unique for my husband so that he knows I care, right? Same formula, totally different customer that it kind of identifies in these user stories.
How would you advise someone like me, right? I'm a product maker, I've content, whatever. How would you advise me to start to define what those cases are, what those user stories, the main, because I mean, you can have thousands of them, right? But that's not useful. How would you advise me to find my top 3 to 5 user stories? Where do I start?
I would suggest that you don't do it. I would suggest that Riley does it.
Mm.
The person who takes the money at the front, and that's for your business where you have a team, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
When Rachel was on the show, she talked on it and touched on it a little bit too. But when you talk to the customer and you say, "What brings you in today?" Right? You're actually creating data points. You
Mhm.
don't think about it that way. You kind of, but it's this idea of tactical empathy,
Yeah.
right? You care. You really do want to know why they're there, but you're also being very intentional about seeing this thing, and might have Riley just keep a notepad by the desk and make some hatch marks about how many people brought in their kids with them, or how many people came in with their friends, or is it spouses shopping together, and what are the conversations that she overhears, right? Because you learn a lot from eavesdropping. That sounds terrible, but people are sitting there and discussing why they buy your product or not, or
Mhm.
what they're looking for. Whoever is interacting with the customers is probably the most qualified person to help you identify those trends. And I will warn, you do want to have some data with it, right? It's too easy to say, I think I know who it is, and I just confirmed my own bias. So, even if it's just tally marks or something, I do encourage people to have some kind of tracking around it beyond just customer accounts, because that doesn't tell the whole story.
For our audience, if they're out doing markets and fairs and things like
Mhm.
that, they can do this on their own too, right?
Mhm.
Where they're just asking those questions. Hey, what brings you, and listening, or people talking in certain categories like, I like this, I was looking for this. You're trying to quantify, and not be such opinionated or subjective, in how you're looking at your customer base. But why would you say I'm not the guy that should be defining that? Because I came up with all this stuff. I mean, why wouldn't how could I not know why I'm doing this, who my customers are?
Because of where you're sitting right now.
Yeah.
And I will say, not everybody has a storefront. And so let's say that you have a totally digital store. Surveys are great. They're still convenient samples because you're only looking at the data that people give you, right? But if that's what you have, offer your customer base a 10% coupon if they reply to your survey, and ask some questions to them about what motivated you to buy for the first time,
Yeah.
or what motivated you to buy for the second time, or whatever is relevant to your business to help you understand. And there's a trap of like, I need to come up with questions just so I have questions. Don't waste people's time. Not only influence them, but with every question you write down, think about, if I had that answer, what would I do with it? Because if you can't answer that question, it's not a good question, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, surveys are a great piece of user research, but getting down to that core of identifying what's the problem we're trying to solve and who am I trying to solve it for are kind of the two biggest pieces. And if you can nail those down, kind of everything else starts to fall into place a little bit.
As a business, I need to be focused on customers and what they want,
Mhm.
and giving value to them. And to give value, I have to understand your site. You've got to understand what people are after, and the only way you're going to deliver value to those people is by providing that. So you got to find it. Now, if I was an artist, however, it's all about me. Oftentimes, right? Just only as an artist, right? About my work, my view on the world, and I'm putting that out there. So I think, depending on our listeners, you could be in one of those categories. Now, if you're an artist who's trying to run a business, you got to start creeping back towards understand the customers, right? But as a pure artist, it's really, if you have a view on the world and your art that you're doing, put it out there however you want. But when you start selling things, and you want to grow a business, you want to scale, you want more revenue, you want more units being passed through your website or your storefront. It's all about the customer. Why am I doing this? And do they understand it? Do they not understand it? Do I need to change things? Do I need to position it differently? Customers come first.
And I do think that's a good point of finding that balance too, because you don't want to turn your business into something that you dread and hate. That's not why most people start a business. And so, finding boundaries is important, and also identifying this is the customer I have today doesn't mean that's the right customer for you to have long term. If you have one type of customer today, you're writing these user stories, and you realize that's not who I want to be serving. They either because it's a product I don't really enjoy making, or they're really high maintenance, or whatever the reason, right? Sometimes writing user stories is useful because you realize that you're not where you want to be. And it helps you kind of figure out where you rather be. I could talk at great lengths about this, and I do, and so, but I don't want to make this like a 4-hour podcast talking about the 10 steps of product management.
Right.
But I will kind of touch on one more piece that I think is really important for what's gotten me to the point where I was able to hit launch on the website. And that is that we talk about what we call an MVP. Now, most people, when they hear an MVP, we think of Michael Jordan, LeBron James, the most valuable player. But in software, it's the minimum viable product. And that sounds kind of awful from the outside, is like, what is the worst product that I can put out there and it still be good enough? But here's where that helps you with decision paralysis. And I'll use the new website, as an example, right? So when putting together my grand vision for learnleathercraft.com, I have 5 years worth of work ahead of me, easy. And I could have easily waited for 5 years until it was perfect to launch it. But maybe things are going to change in that time. Maybe what I perceive to be the value is not where the value is. Maybe there's an obscure feature of the website, but that's what everybody likes the most. And so that's what I really need to be building out more than what maybe I thought in the first place. And so when you are able to launch a minimum viable product, you start getting feedback. Now, you don't want to put out something bad on purpose, right? And so it's a little bit of a balance to say, what does good enough look like? For the website, for instance, I have a class page, as I mentioned. My goal is to have an uploader where people can either submit a class or even submit a form, that when they do that, it goes to a portal and then I can prove them and it goes on the website, right? That is the goal. I kid you not, 36 hours teaching myself app development to try to get that piece working for the website for the launch. And it's almost there. But I realized my goal is to have classes available on the website for people to be able to search. Do I need an uploader for that to be launched and people to start interacting with the class page? No. Do I need it to be there for it to be complete? Maybe, to realize my vision of what I would like that to look like.
Maybe not.
Maybe, but the minimum viable product is having a class page that people can go search for things. And if I could get all of the classes for Prescott up there, that's a good start, right? And that makes me comfortable. It's not a blank page. And then I can continue to develop that. And then people will look at that and say, hey, I really wish it had this feature, or I have this type of class. How do I get it submitted, right? And then I can tell them, hey, that's coming. If you want to email it to me, I can manually add it for now. Bear with me. It may take me a week to get it up there. But the minimum viable product of a class page does not require an app. I could have very well spent that 36 hours writing more content or doing other things that would have helped, or launching the website a week earlier, doing things that would have had more direct value and impact. Some of those things, it's a little bit of a judgment call, right? For me to launch a website, do I need Google Analytics installed? For me, I'm a big data nerd. It pains me to say I launched the website without Google Analytics installed. Now, Shopify has some really great analytics in there that'll help me get started. And I'm not going to really start pushing the website until it's live and I kind of start to tinker with it and get some of that initial feedback, rolling it out like a soft launch. But I do think that by getting it out there, I can start getting that feedback. The users, the customer, can start telling me what's good or bad about it, which will help me develop those future features, right? So I do have what we refer to as a backlog. I had a to-do list that I'll have to prioritize as I have time. That there's pieces of content that I want to write, there's patterns and content that I want to develop, partnered with people as products to sell, all kinds of different things, that press releases, any of those things that you can think of that you need to do, just write them down and
Yeah.
then work on that list.
Oftentimes things never come off the list. Oftentimes, even when I was, in corporate, backlog was
Mhm.
always massive. And you put things in the backlog, and sometimes you're upset. It's like, this really needs to go in this month, in this cycle, right? But there's no room for it. So it's got to go next cycle. And you realize, actually, no, there's something now more priority than that next cycle. And those things get pushed further and further down. And so one of the questions I was asked is, about opportunity lost, the cost of opportunity lost.
Mhm.
You could have put the hours into getting your uploader done, right? But the question is, well, what opportunity am I losing? I'm losing another 2, 3, 4 weeks, however long it would have taken of the site being up, collecting that customer data, promoting this, right? Getting input from these sources, right? How valuable is it? And sometimes the answer may be, no, it's critical. It should be a part of the MVP, because not having it is more costly. But sometimes it's, what? That's not the thing that's going to drive the most value today. I'd rather have the site up or to have the product out the door. Now, in my world, for product development, it could be, maybe it's a certain type of hardware. I want a piece of custom hardware for bags we're going to launch. But the cost of doing that could be 5 to 10 weeks for me to order that. It could increase the end products, cost by $15, whatever, right? Those things are. But I got to ask myself a question: is it really worth me waiting, or could I put the MVP out now? Customers are going to buy it. I can roll the money back into product development later, blah, 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 goes on and on. It can often be seen when we say good, better, best scenario, right? Going for good or better is like, well, you're selling yourself short, right? Why wouldn't you go for excellence? There's a cost to excellence.
I'll kind of wrap up with one warning, though, and that is something I see happen too often. We all have had these softwares that we've used. Some people will launch the minimum viable product, the MVP, and then say, "Oh, I'm done."
Yeah.
And you're not done, right? It's an iteration process, it's a learning process, it's a feedback process. And so I do want to kind of a word of caution of, when you launch that MVP, it is a starting point, it's not a finish point.
Right.
And so making sure that you look for those opportunities for continual improvement and make time for them.
We always talk about, we're racing to the starting line.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're not racing it, you're racing to the starting line. And then when you get to the starting line, then you have your product life cycle that you're trying to manage. That's just the starting point. It's not about
Yeah.
day 15, it's about day 0. We're going to rush there. We're going to figure out and then once you hit day 0 or launch day, it's all about, how do I keep this going? And also later on in life, at least for me, and we're going through this now, is when do I shut it down?
Yeah.
That's a different discussion, right? I mean, so there's
Yeah.
a sunsetting process also for products that you have to think about. That's later on down the life cycle. So,
Definitely a good conversation for another podcast.
yeah. There's times in which you got to shut some things down. Yeah.
Well, I think there's actually some valuable insights that are coming up in the next episode. That's one that I recorded over the break with somebody that we both know, but it's a productivity coach named Matthew Gaddy. I think I may have even referenced him before on the podcast, but
Times here and there.
yeah. So sat down with him over the holiday break and recorded kind of what are, as a productivity coach, what are the types of advice that he often would give people, particularly in this type of a space. And so I think ties into a lot of our planning and momentum, and really will tie into a lot of the conversations that we've had about prioritization too. So that'll be a good one. Looking forward to everybody being able to learn with Matthew. He's a funny guy, he's a good guy, but lots of sage like advice. He's been a good friend, and I will even though he's younger than me, I will say he's been a mentor over the years. And mentors don't have to be older. I've learned a lot from him. So
I'm looking forward to listening to that as well. I haven't heard it yet. I'll listen this week or next week, and I think we got more things like that coming too. So it's going to be a good year. We're kicking the year off pretty strong, and I'm excited about that. That's a great resource. I think the feedback we're getting is people are finding these discussions, as resources, or getting links and things like that out of it. So it's good. looking forward to it. One more resource I want to share. A friend of the podcast is Joe Melling up there in Pendleton, Oregon. Joe has been great. He's got a ton of great YouTube videos out there.
Oh, yeah.
And part of us being a resource to the community is sharing when we come across other resources, right? So just want to share, Joe Melling is launching a leathercraft business-oriented, how to grow your leathercraft business podcast as well. Definitely go check him out. I haven't listened to any of the episodes just yet. That's on my listening list for this week, but definitely encourage people to check that out. Tell him we say hello, leave some comments for him. Likewise for us, if you're listening here, leave some comments, whether it be on Apple or Spotify or YouTube. Comments and questions are welcome. We love that. It actually helps boost engagement and boost our numbers for the podcast and helps those platforms share what we're doing here. So if you get a chance, check them out, but also comment. Let's talk. Let's keep the conversation going.
Well, very good. But let's not keep the conversation going today because we need to wrap up and head over to Tandy. So it's good hanging out. It'll be good to hang out in about 30 minutes. It'd be good to see you face to face. But I'll go ahead and wrap us up here for the day and looking forward to the next one.
Cool. All right. Like, share, subscribe, all that kind of good stuff, Magnus, I'll see you in a few minutes.
Sounds good. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Beyond the Workbench. You can reach us on social platforms at Beyond the Workbench on Facebook, Instagram, and check out beyondtheworkbench.com and listen to more episodes on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.